In the year 845 CE, a Frankish princess could only watch in horror as flames devoured her palace. Viking raiders dragged her mercilessly through the snow, her hair pulled from her scalp, while her crown, the emblem of her royal lineage, lay crushed and caked in mud behind her. She screamed, pleaded for mercy, but the terrifying truth is that death would have been the kinder fate. What the Vikings did to captured princesses went far beyond conventional cruelty. So horrifying were these practices that medieval monks deliberately erased them from historical records. They were acts so shocking that even the Pope, who condoned crusades and public executions, attempted to prohibit them. In this account, we will examine 3 of these dark traditions. First, there was the infamous blood eagle execution. Yet, surprisingly, this was not even among the worst fates reserved for royal captives. An even more psychologically tormenting ritual, known as the Thraw Crown, left deeper scars on the mind and spirit. Second, a particular marriage custom was so dreadful that some princesses preferred to end their own lives rather than endure it, a fact later confirmed by archaeological evidence. Third, one princess managed to survive these atrocities and exacted a vengeance so calculated and ruthless that it resulted in over 5,000 deaths, and the Church eventually canonized her for it. Between 793 and 1066 CE, Viking raiders did not merely attack isolated villages at random. They launched coordinated campaigns aimed specifically at capturing members of European royal families. Historians have documented at least 56 instances of noble women, princesses, queens, and daughters of rulers being taken captive during this period. And those are only the cases we know about. These were not simple kidnappings. Each royal woman represented a strategic asset, a bargaining chip for ransom, a means to forge or break alliances, or, in the cruelest instances, a tool to publicly humiliate an enemy dynasty. Medieval chroniclers across Europe repeatedly described such fates with a phrase that appears in Frankish, Anglo-Saxon, and Irish records alike: a fate worse than death. 3 particular practices were so extreme that they were systematically removed from historical education, effectively hidden from public knowledge until the 1970s. Only then did archaeological discoveries provide undeniable evidence. Why were these events concealed for so long? Because they expose uncomfortable truths about the foundations of medieval European power. Many of today's most prominent noble families can trace their ancestry directly to women who endured these horrors. Let us now turn to what occurred immediately after a princess was captured. From the moment a Viking longship sailed away from shore with her in chains, her very identity was under assault. The first ritual she faced was the Thraw Crown. Imagine, if you will, the transition from waking in a silk-draped palace, greeted by bowing courtiers, to standing exposed on the deck of a ship while your captors prepare to erase your identity. This ritual, known as royal thraldom and recorded in the Frankish annals of St. Bertin in 882 CE, followed a precise, humiliating sequence. The princess was stripped of every royal garment, every ornament, every mark of her status. Then came the ritual blade, shaving her head completely. In medieval society, a woman's hair symbolized femininity, social standing, and marital potential. By removing it, the Vikings were declaring her property of the captors, erasing her former identity. The psychological torment did not end there. Each princess was stripped of her name and reduced to a number. Princess Gisela of the Franks, daughter of Charles the Bald, captured in 882, became simply Thr 47. For 3 years her former self ceased to exist. Everything that had made her significant, that had defined her as a person and a member of a powerful dynasty, was reduced to an impersonal, cold number etched into an iron collar. Next came the public auction. Viking trading centers such as Hedeby and Birka were well-known hubs for commerce, but auctions of captured royalty were a spectacle unlike anything else. These events were carefully staged to maximize humiliation. Contemporary sources describe the process in chilling detail. Captured princesses were paraded through the marketplace in chains, still wearing their iron collars etched with assigned numbers. Merchants would inspect them as though they were livestock, examining teeth, muscle tone, scars, and brands to determine their value. Records from the annals of St. Burton recount that Princess Gisela was sold 3 times during her first year of captivity. She changed owners 3 separate times, and each transaction required her to stand on a raised platform as men placed their bids. On the surface, one might assume that survival was a form of mercy, that being alive was better than death. Yet, what occurred before these auctions was far darker than most people realize. A specific Viking ritual, known to Christian chroniclers as the breaking of the crown spirit, was deliberately described in coded language to conceal its full horror. Archaeological discoveries at a mass grave in Ireland in 2003 provided concrete evidence of this ritual. It involved carefully calibrated torture meant to break the will of the captives without causing permanent physical damage. The reasoning was practical. A princess who was alive but psychologically broken commanded a higher price at market than one who had been killed or maimed. Analysis of skeletal remains from 3 confirmed royal women revealed repeated bone fractures that had healed, shoulder dislocations that had been set multiple times, and signs of forced feeding during hunger strikes. One princess attempted to starve herself to death, and the captors broke her jaw to ensure she could be fed, allowing her to heal before attempting again. This cycle continued because a living princess was valuable gold, while a deceased one was worthless. The iron collar, the thrall device, was only the beginning. Some princesses were never sold. They were retained by their captors, and the abuses they endured were so extreme that in 865 CE, the Pope issued a formal letter attempting to forbid the practice. One of the most notorious cases occurred in 847 CE, when Princess Thyra of Denmark was captured by a rival Viking faction at the age of 17. Over the next 12 years she was forced into 7 marriages, not widowed, not divorced, but married repeatedly, sometimes simultaneously. This system, known as the peace bride tradition, was among the most cruel and calculated political strategies ever devised. When a powerful chieftain captured an enemy princess, simply ransoming her or selling her would bring wealth but not political control. Instead, the princess was used as a human treaty. She was married to allied leaders in neighboring territories, legitimizing their rule through her royal bloodline. The horrifying detail is that these marriages were not exclusive. She was passed from one ally to another, with each union lasting anywhere from 6 months to 2 years. Each ceremony was conducted publicly, fully legal under Norse law, and designed to crush her spirit. Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus documented Princess Thyra's ordeal in the 12th century in his work Gesta Danorum. He wrote, "The Princess Thyra was made bride to 7 lords, each in turn taking her as wife while the others lived. She bore children to 3 of them, yet was called virgin by poets, for her spirit never submitted." Consider the implications. She was forcibly married multiple times, bore children taken from her to serve as heirs to these men, and endured ceremonies intended to erode her identity and autonomy. Archaeological evidence supports that this was not an isolated case. In 2011, researchers in Norway and Iceland uncovered burial patterns that had puzzled historians for decades. High-status women of European royal blood were buried according to Norse tradition as wives of local chieftains. Genetic testing confirmed that these women were of noble lineage, demonstrating the systematic use of captured princesses in political alliances across generations. Some of these princesses bore children with multiple men, and the graves of these offspring were scattered across different regions of Scandinavia, sometimes separated by hundreds of miles. Modern genetic analysis has confirmed that this was not an isolated occurrence. It provides proof that captured princesses were systematically used in political strategies, married to multiple chieftains, producing heirs for rival factions, and ultimately dying far from their homelands. The horror did not escape the attention of the Church. In 865 CE, Pope Nicholas I issued a formal letter condemning this practice. He referred to it as abominable marriage, and threatened excommunication for any Christian ruler who took part. What is less widely known, however, is the specific ritual the Pope was condemning. It was described in the original Latin as the gauntlet of the bride. In this ritual, a captured princess was forced to walk between 2 lines of armed men who struck her with the flat of their swords. The blows were not meant to permanently injure her, but to humiliate and reinforce the reality that she was no longer her own person, that she was property. Most medieval manuscripts edited out this detail, considering it too shocking to preserve. The full account survived in only 3 uncensored copies of the papal letter. You may be wondering whether any princess ever resisted this fate, whether anyone fought back. One did. Her actions were so meticulously planned and devastating that, when fully revealed, they explain why the Church eventually canonized her. Before we discuss her, however, it is important to understand the third practice, one so extreme that historians once tried to erase all traces of it. Physical evidence proving its existence was only discovered in 2018. In 866 CE, Vikings conquered the region of Northumbria, in what is now northern England. King Osbert was killed in battle, and his sister, whose name was erased from records and is known only as the Princess of York, was captured alive. 3 days after her capture, she was forced to witness the murder of her nephews, aged 7 and 9. Witnessing this was not enough for her captors. They compelled her to participate. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records this event using euphemistic language, as the monks who documented it were horrified. Modern historians, cross-referencing Norse sagas and archaeological evidence, now call this the blood witness ritual. The ritual was designed to enforce absolute loyalty. Captured women were made to assist in the execution of their own male relatives. They would hold chains, hand over weapons, or stand with their hands on the executioner's shoulder, forced into physical contact with the dying family member. Archaeological evidence confirms this. In 2018, a team excavating a mass execution site in York discovered sets of shackles of various sizes, carefully arranged. Large iron cuffs were clearly intended for adult men, while smaller cuffs matched the wrist size of women. Chemical analysis revealed that the smaller cuffs had been in direct contact with the larger ones during executions, indicating that a smaller individual, almost certainly a female captive, was physically positioned to touch the condemned while they died. Dr. Helena Mortensen, the lead archaeologist on the excavation, stated in her report, "The arrangement of these restraint systems demonstrates deliberate forced participation by a smaller-statured individual, likely female, in the execution process itself." Let that fact sink in. The purpose of this brutality was not mere sadism. It was psychological warfare. In Norse culture, witnessing or participating in the death of a relative without taking revenge made one spiritually complicit, burdened with guilt and shame. The Vikings deliberately created a situation in which the princess had no moral or ethical escape. Either she took part and was haunted by the act for life, or she refused and was killed. Either way, her honor and autonomy were destroyed. According to Norse legal codes of the time, a woman who witnessed the death of a close relative and failed to seek vengeance was labeled a niding, a person without honor, fit only for thraldom. The Vikings thus created a horrifying situation. Royal captives who, even if they managed to escape, could not return home without being dishonored in the eyes of their own culture. In this context, the blood eagle, horrific as it was, could almost be considered merciful compared to the methods they devised. One particularly cruel technique was called the weighted drowning. In this execution, the victim would be bound in chains and slowly lowered into a pit that was gradually filled with water over several hours. The captive princess was not merely a passive victim. She was required to assist in the process, helping to manage the chains that restrained her. Excavations at 3 separate sites, in York, England, Dublin, Ireland, and an unidentified location in France, have revealed execution pits with distinct architectural features, such as stepped interior walls for gradual descent and multiple anchor points for securing chains during the procedure. At the York site, forensic analysis confirmed that the victims died by drowning, but not immediately. They had survived for several hours while restrained, fully aware of the rising water and completely unable to escape, sometimes while assisting in the lowering of the chains. The psychological torment of this extended ordeal is almost unimaginable. How common was this practice? There is documented evidence of at least 12 distinct cases across 3 countries in which royal women were forced to participate in the executions of their own relatives. These are only the cases historians have confirmed. Many others likely went unrecorded. Yet, despite these horrors, some royal women did survive and exacted vengeance in ways so calculated and ruthless that they became legendary. One such figure was Olga of Kiev. When she eventually rose to power, the measures she took in retaliation made all prior atrocities seem tame by comparison. In 945 CE, Princess Olga witnessed the brutal death of her husband, Prince Igor, at the hands of the Drevlians. They tied him to two bent trees and released them, tearing him apart. The Drevlians, an Eastern Slavic tribe influenced by Viking military tactics, sent ambassadors to Olga with a proposal: marry their prince, legitimize their rule over Kiev, and your life will be spared. They expected her to submit and become yet another peace bride, like Princess Thyra of Denmark. Olga had other plans. Her actions are recorded in multiple contemporary sources, including the Byzantine Chronicles, the Russian Primary Chronicle, and corroborated by archaeological findings. Her revenge was executed with extraordinary precision and psychological insight. The first phase involved the ambassadors. When the Drevlians arrived in Kiev, Olga received them warmly, feigning respect and honor. She had them carried, still seated in their boat, through the streets of Kiev as a display of courtesy. The ambassadors believed they had triumphed. In reality, she ordered them taken directly to a massive pit she had prepared in her courtyard and buried them alive while still in the boat. The Russian Primary Chronicle notes that she spoke to them as the soil covered them, taunting, "Is the honor to your taste?" In this act, she employed the same psychological torment that the Vikings had used on captured princesses, forcing her victims to confront the inevitability of their deaths, powerless to intervene. Archaeologists excavating Kiev in 2003 discovered a mass grave containing the remains of a wooden boat and 17 male skeletons showing clear signs of live burial. Soil found in the airways and the positioning of the bones confirmed the historical accounts, and dating aligns precisely with the year 945 CE. The second phase of her revenge is known as the Bathhouse Inferno. Olga sent word to the Drevlians, requesting that their elite men escort her to their lands in honor of her visit. They dispatched 47 of their most distinguished nobles. Upon arrival in Kiev, Olga invited them to a luxurious, customary bathhouse, ostensibly to honor their status. The nobles entered the bathhouse, expecting a routine ritual of hospitality. Everything appeared normal, until Olga enacted the next stage of her meticulously planned vengeance. Olga's next phase of revenge, known as the Bathhouse Inferno, was just as meticulously planned as her first. She invited 47 of the most prominent Drevlians, their elite nobles, to Kiev under the pretense of honoring them with a traditional bathhouse ceremony. Once inside, the doors were securely barred from the outside, trapping the nobles within, and the structure was set ablaze. All 47 perished in the flames. Archaeological evidence confirms this event was historical, not legend. Excavations in Kiev between 2015 and 2017 uncovered the remains of a 10th-century bathhouse that had been catastrophically burned. Within the ruins, archaeologists found the skeletal remains of 43 adult men, all showing signs of death by fire. Chemical testing of the door materials demonstrated that iron brackets had been added after construction to bar the doors from the outside, exactly matching the Chronicle's account. Olga's revenge escalated further with what is known as the Feast of Ashes. She sent word that she would attend her husband's funeral feast and instructed the Drevlians to prepare an elaborate ceremony. Approximately 5,000 people, including the tribe's military and political leaders, gathered. Olga's forces waited until everyone was intoxicated, then attacked and massacred all 5,000. Archaeological excavations at Iskarstan, the Drevlian capital, have confirmed a mass grave containing thousands of individuals dating to the mid-940s CE. The arrangement of the bones suggests the victims were not killed in battle but were executed while sitting or prone, likely incapacitated by alcohol. Many skulls show singular, precise blows from behind or above, consistent with execution-style killings of unresisting victims. Her final act, called the Bird Army, demonstrated both ingenuity and terror. Olga returned to lay siege to Iskarstan. After a prolonged siege, she demanded a small tribute, 3 pigeons and 3 sparrows from each household. The Drevlians, desperate, complied. Olga's forces tied small incendiary devices made of sulfur and cloth to the birds' legs, set them alight, and released them. The birds returned to their nests in thatched roofs throughout the city, igniting fires simultaneously. By morning, nearly the entire city was consumed. Archaeological layers at Iskrstan show a catastrophic burn dating to the mid-10th century, destroying approximately 90% of the settlement in a single event, consistent with multiple ignition points caused by flaming birds. Despite the sheer scale of her vengeance, Olga of Kiev was canonized by the Christian Church as Saint Olga. Her feast day is celebrated on July 11th, and the Orthodox Church regards her as equal to the apostles. She converted to Christianity after her revenge and devoted the remainder of her life to spreading the faith throughout Kievan Rus. The Church essentially viewed her pre-baptism acts as outside the bounds of moral judgment, emphasizing her later religious contributions. Historically, her actions had profound consequences. After 945 CE, Slavic royal women were largely no longer targeted for capture by Vikings or allied forces. Documentation shows that between 900 and 945 CE, 23 Slavic princesses were taken. After Olga's revenge, only 3 were captured, and those by groups unaware of her reputation. Her example spread quickly. The message was clear: capturing a Slavic princess could result in the total annihilation of one's people. Archaeological evidence supports this shift. After 945 CE, Viking grave goods in Eastern Europe show a dramatic reduction in Slavic royal artifacts, while Frankish and Anglo-Saxon items became more common, indicating a strategic shift in target selection. To summarize, between 793 and 1066 CE, at least 200 royal women were captured by Vikings and their allies, women whose stories were mostly erased from history. Some were sold into thraldom, stripped of identity and reduced to numbers on iron collars. Some were used as peace brides, passed between rulers like political currency and producing children for rival dynasties. Others were forced to participate in the deaths of their own families, carrying lifelong trauma and spiritual dishonor. Modern research has traced the lasting legacy of these women. A 2019 large-scale DNA study of Icelandic populations revealed that approximately 62% of maternal lineages trace back to Britain and Western Europe, while paternal lineages are predominantly Scandinavian. In other words, the genetic imprint of these captured women is literally embedded in contemporary populations. This practice ended only due to the combination of Christianity spreading across Scandinavia in the 10th and 11th centuries and the demonstrable consequences of defying royal women, exemplified by Olga of Kiev. For nearly 3 centuries, however, these brutal practices were normalized. Royal women were treated as political tools, military assets, and objects of power, most of whose names are lost to history. We remember Gisela because she was the daughter of a king whose court kept records. We know Thyra through poetic accounts. And we know Olga because her revenge was so extreme it became legendary. The vast majority, however, exist only as skeletal remains, iron collars in museums, and DNA sequences. Before you reflect on this, consider the deeper questions. Which part of this history impacted you most? The systematic dehumanization of the THR crown, the psychological torture of the peace bride tradition, the forced participation in family executions, or Olga's extreme retaliation? Should Olga be seen as a hero for striking back or as a war criminal for the methods she employed? Is there a moral distinction between the brutality suffered by these women and the vengeance Olga executed? This story challenges us to confront the uncomfortable truths of history. Next week, we will explore the fate of captured Viking warriors under Anglo-Saxon rule, a level of brutality that makes the blood eagle appear merciful. If you have followed this story this far, you appreciate history in its full, raw reality. Share this account with someone who believes they understand Viking history, and prepare for the next exploration into the darker chapters of the past.